My name is Clara Thorne, and I'm 34 years old. For most of my life, I've been what you might call a background character. The sort of person you'd see in a photograph, standing just behind someone far more important, slightly out of focus. By trade, I'm an illustrator, a quiet profession for a quiet woman. But for one pivotal year, I had another name, a secret one whispered in the halls of power with a mixture of fear and admiration. In the shadows, I was Vindex. I never expected that the skill I honed in quiet solitude, the one thing that was truly mine, would become a weapon. I certainly never imagined that a single drawing, born of righteous anger in my cramped little studio, would be the key to saving the one person who had always effortlessly outshone me, and in the process bring down one of the most corrupt and powerful men our city had ever known. It was the quietest, most satisfying revenge imaginable, not on a person, but on a world that had always told me I was invisible. Before I dive into this story of secrets, shadows, and the surprising power of a well-aimed pen, I want to connect with all of you who are listening. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you know. For those of you who are new here, make sure you subscribe to join a community of people who understand that the most compelling stories often belong to the quietest voices. Now let me tell you how a forgotten woman in the corner of the ballroom became the most feared name in city politics. It all began, as so many things did in my life, in the orbit of Serafina Beaumont. The St. Jude's Foundation Gala was the glittering apex of the city's social season, a place where fortunes were pledged and reputations were made. I was there, as always, as Sarah's plus one. She swept into the ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel like a conquering queen, draped in a gown the color of a summer twilight, a constellation of borrowed diamonds at her throat. Heads turned, conversations faltered. A path seemed to clear for her, as if by magic. I trailed in her wake, a small dark moon, to her brilliant sun, clutching a small clutch purse that held my phone and a well-worn moleskine notebook. "Clara, darling, you must try the champagne," she murmured, her hand alight, proprietary weight on my arm. "It's divine." She smiled at me, a dazzling, genuine smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. I knew, however, that it was a smile she gave to everyone, from senators to busboys. It was her gift and her tool. "I'm fine with water, Sarah," I said, my voice barely audible over the string quartet. "Oh, you and your sensible ways," she chided gently, her eyes already scanning the room, cataloging the powerful, the influential, the important. "Don't just hide in the corner all night. Mingle a little." I gave a non-committal nod. Mingle. It was a word that didn't exist in my vocabulary. For me, a party like this wasn't a social event. It was an anthropological study. I found a quiet alcove near a potted palm, the perfect vantage point from which to observe the human zoo. I was a ghost at the feast, and I preferred it that way. My invisibility was a cloak I had tailored myself over many years. It was comfortable, safe. While Sarah commanded the room's attention, I opened my notebook. My pen, a fine-tipped micron, found the page, and my fingers began to move. I sketched the over-eager sycophant laughing too loudly at a banker's tired joke, the society matron whose face was pulled so tight she looked perpetually surprised, the young ingenue whose ambition burned brighter than her sequins. I captured them all, not as they presented themselves, but as I saw them, a collection of appetites, vanities, and insecurities. Then he arrived, Councilman Alistair Finch. He was handsome in a severe, chiseled way, with silver wings at his temples that suggested wisdom rather than age. He radiated a manufactured sincerity that set my teeth on edge. He moved through the crowd like a shark, all teeth and predatory grace, shaking hands, clapping backs, his eyes cold, and assessing. I watched as he intercepted Sarah near the champagne fountain. "Serafina," he boomed, his voice a rich baritone designed for campaign speeches. You are a vision. You honor us all with your presence. Councilman, Sarah replied, her smile radiant, but to my trained eye, a little cooler than usual. How kind of you to say so. I was just speaking with your father the other day, Finch continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. A great man, a pillar of this city. We were discussing the future, the importance of legacy, that beautiful home of yours, Beaumont Manor. It's a landmark, a treasure we must protect. His words were slick with a meaning that lay just beneath the surface. I felt a prickle of unease. My pen began to move of its own accord. I ignored the meticulous cross-hatching I usually favored and went for something more vicious. I drew Finch, not as a man, but as a Venus flytrap, his handsome face the alluring lure, his perfectly tailored suit the carnivorous leaves. Sarah was a delicate butterfly, hovering just a little too close to the trap. The sketch was cruel, sharp, and deeply satisfying. My friendship with Sarah was a study in contrasts, forged in the competitive fires of the Allendale College of Art and Design. She had been the muse, the one whose effortless charisma and classical beauty made her the subject of a dozen portraits. I was the technician, the one hunched over a drafting table until 3 a.m, mastering perspective and anatomy. I still remembered the final portfolio review for the prestigious Endicott Prize. My submission was a series of intricate anatomical studies, technically flawless and emotionally resonant. Sarah's was a single, large-scale self-portrait, beautiful, but in my opinion, emotionally shallow. She had won, of course. The judges had praised her bold vulnerability. One of them, a visiting artist, had patted my shoulder and said, "Your work shows incredible discipline, my dear. Very workmanlike." Workmanlike. The word had stung, a label that had followed me ever since. I was the reliable one, the skilled hand, the plain girl who did the work while the beautiful one inspired it. I never truly resented Sarah for it. It wasn't her fault the world was wired the way it was. But I was acutely, sometimes painfully, aware that we moved through life on entirely different planes of existence. Her beauty was a key that opened every door. I had to learn how to pick the locks. That feeling, the sting of being dismissed, of being workmanlike, was the fertile ground from which Vindex had grown. About 2 years prior, a city contract for a new public library had been awarded to a construction company with a reputation for shoddy work and deep connections to the mayor's office. The press had reported on it with a weary resignation. It was just how things were done. I was incensed. I stayed up all night, fueled by black coffee and fury, and drew a cartoon. It depicted the mayor and the construction CEO as two grubby children, gleefully swapping trading cards, a library for a bag of money. I rendered it in my sharpest, most unforgiving style, and on a whim created an encrypted email address and a pseudonym, Vindex, the Avenger. I sent it to the Crucible, a fiercely independent online political journal known for its take-no-prisoners approach. I didn't expect to hear back. The next day, it was their lead story. My drawing, my anger, was suddenly visible to the entire city. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The editor, a man I knew only as Julian Hayes, sent me a one-line reply, "More." So I sent him more. Vindex became a recurring feature, a scalpel slicing through the city's bluster and corruption. I skewered a zoning commissioner for his dodgy land deals, a police chief for his department's cook statistics, a corporate polluter for their fake environmentalism. Vindex's identity was the most tightly guarded secret in the city's media landscape. Julian and I only ever communicated through encrypted channels. He never asked who I was, and I never offered. Vindex was a phantom, a ghost with a poison pen. And in that anonymity, I found a voice, a power that Clara Thorne could never have dreamed of. My work was judged on its merit alone, its wit, its insight, its unflinching truth. No one called Vindex workmanlike. They called her devastating. A week after the gala, Sarah called me, Her voice choked with panic. "Clara, can I come over? Something terrible has happened." She arrived at my small, cluttered apartment, looking like a wilted flower. Her usual radiance was gone, replaced by a pale, drawn anxiety. She sank onto my sofa, which was covered in art books and half-finished sketches, and buried her face in her hands. It took her a long time to speak. "It's Papa," she finally whispered. "The business is failing. Has been for years. He hid it from us. He's so proud, you know. He might lose everything. The house, Beaumont Manor." Her voice broke. I made her tea, my hands moving with a comforting efficiency. I'd seen Sarah sad before, over a breakup or a bad review of a charity event she'd chaired. I had never seen her like this. This was a deep existential terror. "Finch knows," she continued, her voice trembling. "He approached Papa again. He offered him a lifeline. He said he could make a few calls, get the bank to restructure the loans, make some regulatory hurdles disappear. He made it sound like a friendly offer, a favor for an old family. But it wasn't," I said, already knowing the answer. She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her perfect cheek. "He wants Papa's public endorsement for his waterfront redevelopment project. He wants the Beaumont name, the legacy, to stand beside him and give his corrupt project a seal of approval." I knew the project she was talking about. Vindex had already started sniffing around it. It was a monstrous plan to seize a huge swath of the city's historic, low-income waterfront district under eminent domain, tear it all down, and replace it with luxury condos and a private marina. It was a land grab, pure and simple, designed to enrich Finch and his cronies while displacing thousands of families. "My father refused," Sarah said, a flicker of pride in her voice. "He said he wouldn't sell his name to legitimize such a thing. He told Finch to leave." She took a shaky breath. "And then Finch, he got ugly. He told Papa that if he didn't play along, he wouldn't just let the business fail, he would actively destroy it. He mentioned some old shipping contracts from decades ago, some irregularities, things that were common practice then, but would look terrible now. He threatened to leak it to the press, to trigger a federal audit. It's blackmail, Clara. He's trying to ruin my father, to take our home." Sarah, the golden girl, the one for whom the world always bent, was trapped. For the first time in her life, she was facing a problem her beauty and charm couldn't solve. She spent the next few days in a flurry of activity, calling in favors, meeting with old family friends, trying to find a way out. She put on a brave face, dressing in her most elegant clothes, her smile as dazzling as ever, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. The doors that had always swung open for her were now firmly shut. The people she sought help from were either indebted to Finch or terrified of his power. They offered sympathy, but no solutions. She came back to my apartment late one night, utterly defeated. The flawless mask had crumbled. She was just a scared daughter, terrified for her family. "It's no use," she said, her voice hollow. "They're all afraid of him. My whole life, a smile and a kind word, open doors, a little charm, a gentle plea. It was always enough. But this door is made of iron, and I don't have the key." She started to cry, not the delicate tears I'd seen before, but wrenching, hopeless sobs. I sat beside her, my arm around her shaking shoulders. I felt a familiar pang of helplessness, the same feeling I'd had my whole life when confronted with a world that didn't play by fair rules. But this time, something else was mixed in with it, a cold, hard knot of anger. A fury so pure and white-hot, it felt like a physical force inside my chest. This man, this preening, corrupt monster, had taken the strongest, most vibrant person I knew and broken her. He had used his power to crush a good man and terrorize a family, all for greed, and he was going to get away with it. No, a voice inside me said, a voice that sounded less like Clara and more like Vindex. No, he is not. Sura thought the door was made of iron. She was wrong. It was made of paper, of secrets and lies, and I was the one who knew how to tear paper to shreds. In that moment, watching my friend weep, I stopped being a passive observer. The fight had come to my door, and Vindex was about to answer. That night, my small studio apartment transformed into a war room. The comforting scent of turpentine and paper was replaced by the electric hum of my computer and the bitter aroma of stale coffee. I became a creature of the night, a digital archaeologist digging through the boneyard of public records. I cross-referenced property deeds, campaign finance disclosures, city council meeting minutes, and corporate registration documents. My walls, normally covered with life drawings and landscape studies, were soon papered with printouts, connected by a sprawling spiderweb of red yarn. I was no longer just an artist. I was a hunter, and Alistair Finch was my prey. I mapped his network of shell corporations, his political appointees, and his legislative favors. A pattern began to emerge, a dark constellation of greed and corruption. My first strike had to be precise, a warning shot. I spent an entire night sketching, erasing, and resketching until I had it just right. The final image depicted Finch as a master puppeteer, a smug grin on his face, standing atop City Hall. Below him, the members of the City Zoning Commission danced on strings, their limbs flailing in a grotesque pantomime of civic duty. The strings themselves weren't twine. They were glittering gold chains that led back to the logo of a shadowy real estate conglomerate, Aurelian Holdings. I uploaded the cartoon to the secure server for the Crucible. The caption was simple, "The People's Servants." It was published at dawn. By mid-morning, it was the talk of the city. The image was sharp, witty, and just ambiguous enough to be deniable, but everyone who mattered knew exactly what it meant. At a press conference about a new public park, a reporter blindsided Finch with a question about it. "Councilman, the cartoonist Vindex seems to be suggesting a link between you and Aurelian Holdings regarding the waterfront project. Do you have a response?" Finch's practiced smile didn't waver, but I saw a flicker of something cold in his eyes. "I don't respond to the cowardly scribblings of an anonymous troll," he said smoothly. "This is a desperate smear campaign by those who are afraid of progress. They hide in the shadows because they can't win in the light." He thought he was dismissing me, but he was issuing a challenge. Cowardly scribblings. The phrase echoed in my head, stoking the fire. "I'll show you a coward." I sent a message to Julian. "I'm onto something big with Finch. It's deeper than just Aurelian. I need a researcher, someone who can dig into financials, someone I can trust." Julian's reply was instantaneous. "You've got it. I'll connect you with someone on my staff. They'll be your cutout. Send your queries through me. I'll pass them on. Be careful, Vindex. Finch plays dirty." The next few days were a blur of frenetic energy. I would feed questions and names to Julian, and hours later, a dossier of information would appear in my encrypted inbox. The researcher was good, a bloodhound on a scent. They uncovered a web of transactions, a daisy chain of money being funneled from Aurelian Holdings through 3 smaller companies before landing in a civic improvement fund managed by Finch's brother-in-law. It was classic, grimy corruption, but the trail was deliberately convoluted. It was a story that would be difficult to tell with bank statements alone. I needed an image that would cut through the noise. For the second cartoon, I drew inspiration from Goya. The image was darker, more visceral. It showed a grand banquet table set in a desolate, ruined landscape. Finch, depicted with the bloated, greasy face of a glutton, was carving up a roasted turkey shaped like the waterfront's historic clock tower. Around the table sat his cronies, their mouths wide open like hungry birds. And reaching up from beneath the tablecloth, from the darkness below, were the skeletal hands of the families who were being displaced. I titled it, Progress. The reaction to the second cartoon was a firestorm. It was shared tens of thousands of times on social media. The image of the skeletal hands became a symbol for the anti-redevelopment protesters. People printed it on signs and t-shirts. My quiet, solitary drawing had taken on a life of its own. It had become the voice of a movement. Sarah came over, her eyes shining with a desperate hope. She held up her phone, showing me the cartoon. "Have you seen this, Clara? This Vindex. It's incredible. It's like they're in Finch's head. They're saying everything we've been too afraid to say out loud. For the first time, I feel like we have a chance." I just nodded, my heart pounding with a secret, terrifying pride. Seeing the hope in her face, knowing I had put it there, was a feeling more potent than any praise I had ever received for my art. It felt like I was finally using my skill for something that truly mattered. But my secret created a new invisible wall between us. I wanted to tell her, to share the burden and the thrill, but I couldn't. Vindex's power was in her anonymity. The moment she had a face, my plain, unremarkable face, the spell would be broken. Finch was feeling the pressure. His polished veneer was beginning to crack. Instead of ignoring Vindex, he went on the attack. In an interview with the city's main newspaper, he took aim directly at the Beaumont family. "It's truly sad," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "The Beaumonts are a fine old family, but they've fallen on hard times. They came to me asking for a piece of the waterfront project, a way to salvage their failing business. When I told them the contracts would be awarded based on merit, not on a family name, they turned on me. This whole Vindex campaign, it's clearly their doing. It's sour grapes, a pathetic attempt to blackmail me into giving them a handout." The article was a public humiliation. It painted her proud father as a desperate beggar, and their principled stand as a selfish ploy. Sarah was devastated, her father incandescent with rage. Finch was trying to frame them, to discredit them before they could do any more damage. He was turning our defense into an attack on us. I was in my studio, staring at the newspaper clipping, when a new message from Julian arrived. It was a single file attachment. I opened it. It was a scanned document, a leaked prospectus from a holding company in the Cayman Islands. My researcher had found the smoking gun. The holding company was the sole owner of Aurelian Holdings, the main developer for the waterfront project. And the majority shareholder of that offshore company, a trust registered in the name of Alistair Finch's wife. It was the entire game. Finch wasn't just getting kickbacks, he owned the whole crooked enterprise. The project wasn't just enriching his friends, it was designed to pour hundreds of millions of dollars directly into his own pockets. But the document was complex, dry. It was proof, but it wasn't a weapon. Not yet. I needed something more, something visceral, undeniable. I needed a picture. I sent another message to Julian. "I have the link. Finch owns the whole thing, through an offshore trust in his wife's name. I need to know where he's meeting his people. Face to face, I need to put him in the room where it happens." The reply came a day later. It was a tip from a source inside the construction magnate's company, a man named Marcus Thorne, who was set to get the primary building contract. The source was a disgruntled accountant who Finch had recently strong-armed. The final deal was being signed in 2 days. The location, Thorne's yacht, the Solstice, during the annual regatta gala at the exclusive Blackwood Marina Club. The Blackwood Marina Club. My heart sank. It was a fortress of old money and privilege. Security was legendary. A place like that had a guest list carved in stone. Clara Thorne could never get within a mile of it, but Seraphina Beaumont could. This was the most dangerous step. I had to bring Sarah into the conspiracy, at least part of the way. I invited her over, my apartment feeling smaller and more claustrophobic than ever. I sat her down. "Saria," I began, my voice unsteady. "I need to ask you something, and you have to trust me. No questions." She looked at me, her face pale and weary. "Clara, I'm not in the mood for games. This isn't a game. It's about Finch." I took a deep breath. I have a source, the person who has been feeding information to Vindex. It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. This source is close to getting the final piece of evidence, the thing that could bring Finch down for good, but they need to get into the regatta gala on Saturday. Specifically, they need to get close to Marcus Thorne's yacht. Sarah stared at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. Vindex's source, how do you know them? I can't tell you that. You just have to believe that this person is on our side. They are risking everything to expose Finch, but they can't get into the gala. We can. Your family are members of the club. The pieces started to click into place in her mind. Her exhaustion was replaced by a flicker of the old, decisive Sarah. This was an action she could take, a tangible step. They need an invitation? They need more than that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. They need a distraction. They need me. I'm the one who passes the messages. I have to be there to meet them. Can you get me in, Sarah? Can you get me into the gala as your guest? She searched my face, her eyes filled with a million questions I couldn't answer. She saw the desperate sincerity in my expression. She saw the last wild hope for her family's salvation. Okay, she said, her voice firm. I don't understand any of this, Clara, but I trust you. She stood up, her spine straight, a general taking command. Leave it to me. We're going to a party. The night of the regatta gala was warm and oppressively humid, the air thick with the scent of salt water and expensive perfume. I stood beside Sarah at the entrance to the Blackwood Marina Club, feeling like an imposter. I wore a simple sleeveless dress of midnight blue, the only formal thing I owned. It was designed to be overlooked, a stark contrast to the gown Sarah wore. Hers was a shimmering column of silver silk that seemed to have been spun from moonlight. She was breathtaking, a vision of old-world glamour. As we walked in, she drew every eye, just as I had planned. She was the dazzling spectacle. I was the shadow she cast. Are you all right? She whispered, sensing my tension. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. I'm fine. I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just not my kind of crowd. Focus, Clara, she said, her voice low and steady. Tell me the plan again. Marcus Thorne's yacht is the Solstice, berthed at the end of Pier 4, I recited, the words a frantic mantra in my head. Finch is expected to arrive for a private meeting around 10 o'clock. My source needs to get a photograph of that meeting. I need to get onto that pier, alone. And I'm the distraction, Sarai finished. She took a deep, steadying breath, her public persona clicking into place like elegant armor. All right, let's give them a show. For the next hour, we played our parts. Sorrel floated through the party, a magnet for conversation and admiration. I followed a few steps behind, a silent lady in waiting. I kept my eyes on the clock and on the entrance. At 9:45, I saw him. Alistair Finch swept in, all smiles and handshakes, his aide trailing behind him. He made a point of greeting the mayor and a few other local dignitaries before making his way toward the veranda that overlooked the marina. It was time. I gave Sarah the almost imperceptible nod we had agreed upon. She was talking to a cluster of people near the main bar, just a few yards from the glass doors that led out to the piers. She gave me a tiny, tense smile in return. Then, with the practiced grace of a stage actress, she turned, took a step back, and appeared to trip. Her arm flew out, colliding with a waiter's tray laden with flutes of champagne. The crash was spectacular. Glass shattered on the marble floor, champagne sprayed in a wide arc, soaking the tuxedo of a portly real estate developer. The sudden noise and motion created an instant vortex of chaos. People gasped. Staff rushed forward with towels. The developer bellowed in outrage, and in that moment, all eyes, including those of the two security guards stationed by the pier doors, were on Serafina Beaumont as she offered 1,000 mortified apologies. That was my window. I slipped through the doors, my movements swift and silent. The humid night air enveloped me. The cacophony of the party faded behind me, replaced by the gentle lapping of water against the hulls of multi-million-dollar yachts and the rhythmic clinking of rigging against masts. The air smelled clean, salty. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was equal parts terror and exhilaration. I was outside my element, a creature of ink and paper, now moving through a world of consequence and physical risk. I hurried down the pier, my low heels making soft tapping sounds on the weathered wood. Pier 4. I saw the sign and turned, my eyes scanning the names on the sterns of the docked vessels. Seabreeze, Wanderlust, Solstice. There it was. It was a sleek, modernist monstrosity, all gleaming white fiberglass and tinted black windows. It was dark save for a single warm light glowing from a porthole in the main cabin. I found a spot to hide, a dark space between a large canvas-covered winch and a stack of coiled ropes. My hiding place smelled of diesel and damp canvas. I crouched down, my body trembling. I pulled a small, high-resolution camera from my clutch. It felt heavy and alien in my hand. I was an artist, not a spy. What was I doing here? The doubt was a cold wave washing over me. Then I thought of Sarah's tear-streaked face, of her father's stooped shoulders, of Finch's smug, dismissive voice calling my work cowardly scribblings. The anger returned, burning away the fear. Footsteps on the pier. I held my breath, shrinking further into the shadows. It was Finch. He walked quickly, his head down, looking nothing like the confident politician inside the party. He looked like a man with something to hide. He glanced around furtively before stepping onto the gangplank of the Solstice and disappearing inside. A minute later, the light in the cabin porthole brightened. I peered out from my hiding place. The porthole offered a clear, unobstructed view into the yacht's luxurious salon, and there they were, Alistair Finch and Marcus Thorne. They were shaking hands. Thorne gestured to a polished mahogany table where an open briefcase sat. My stomach clenched. The briefcase was filled with stacks of cash. It wasn't a contract signing. It was a payoff, a bribe. So crude, so blatant. My researcher had uncovered the offshore accounts, the sophisticated methods of money laundering. But here, in private, they reverted to the oldest form of corruption. I raised the camera. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely frame the shot. Steady, Clara, steady. I took a breath, held it, and pressed the shutter. A soft, almost inaudible click. I took another and another. I zoomed in on the briefcase, on their faces, on the handshake. Got it. I had it. Clear, damning, irrefutable proof. I slipped the camera back into my purse and began to retreat, moving silently from shadow to shadow. Just as I reached the head of the pier, I heard a voice. "Hey, you there?" My blood ran cold. One of the security guards was walking toward me, his flashlight beam cutting a sharp cone through the darkness. I was caught. It was over. But then, from the direction of the party, came Sarah's voice, sharp and clear. "Oh, there you are. I've been looking all over for you." She walked briskly toward us, her silver dress a beacon in the gloom. She looped her arm through mine, her grip like steel. She turned to the guard, her expression a perfect blend of mild annoyance and regal authority. "I am so sorry. My friend was feeling a bit faint from the heat. I told her to get some fresh air. We'll be heading home now." The guard, momentarily blinded by the full force of Sarah's beauty and confidence, was flustered. "Of course, Miss Beaumont. My apologies." Sarah pulled me away, walking at a clip that was just short of a run. We didn't speak until we were in the car, speeding away from the marina. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel, so tightly her knuckles were white. "Did you get it?" she asked, her voice breathless. "Did your source get what they needed?" I looked at her, my partner, my beautiful, brave friend, who had just saved me without even knowing the whole truth. I opened my clutch, and showed her the small digital camera. I just nodded, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. I think so, I said. I really think so. Back in the sanctuary of my studio, the adrenaline of the night gave way to a focused, almost feverish calm. The city slept, but I was wide awake. I downloaded the photographs. They were perfect. The lighting from the cabin was warm and clear, illuminating every detail: the smug triumph on Finch's face, the glint of Thorne's expensive watch, the crisp edges of the $100 bills in the briefcase. The photo was the evidence, the factual bedrock. But a fact can be argued, debated, spun. I needed to deliver the emotional truth, the knockout blow. I needed to draw. I pulled out a fresh sheet of heavy Bristol board, the clean white surface a canvas for my rage. My pen flew across the page. This would be my masterpiece, the culmination of everything Vindex was, and everything I had become. I decided on a triptych, a 3-act story, told in pictures. The first panel was Finch the public servant. I drew him on a campaign stage, his hand over his heart, a flag waving piously behind him. His expression was one of earnest sincerity, his mouth open as he delivered a promise to the unseen crowd. I rendered him in the clean, heroic lines of a propaganda poster. The caption below read, "The Promise." The second panel was the truth. It was not a caricature, but a stark, photorealistic rendering of the scene on the yacht, drawn directly from my photograph. I captured every detail, every shadow, every reflection on the polished wood, the handshake, the open briefcase, the naked greed in their eyes. There was no artistry here, only brutal, unflinching fact. The caption was a single cold word: the transaction. The third and final panel was the consequence. I unleashed the full force of my style, the anger and grotesquerie that was Vindex's signature. I drew Finch as a colossal, monstrous figure, his body a twisted amalgam of luxury high-rises and concrete. His mouth was a cavernous demolition site, and he was in the act of devouring the small, charming houses of the waterfront district. And there, teetering on the very edge of his gaping maw, was a perfect jewel box rendering of Beaumont Manor, its lights flickering as if about to be extinguished. The caption was the most damning of all: the progress. I scanned the finished drawing and the photographs. I opened my encrypted email client and composed a new message to Julian Hayes at the Crucible. I attached the files. My hands hovered over the keyboard. This was it, the point of no return. I typed a one-word subject line, Vindex, and I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, the exhaustion of the last few weeks washing over me in a tidal wave. I had done it. I had fired the shot. Now all I could do was wait for the sound. I didn't have to wait long. The Crucible published it all, just after sunrise. The story, with my triptych as the banner image and the raw photograph as the undeniable proof, didn't just make a splash. It was a tsunami. It was the only thing anyone in the city was talking about. The images were everywhere, on every news channel, on the front page of every paper's website, shared by hundreds of thousands of people on social media. The triptych was perfect. The first panel showed his hypocrisy, the second showed his crime, and the third showed his victims. There was no defense against it. It was a complete and total vivisection of a man's career, laid bare for the world to see. By noon, Alistair Finch's world was a smoldering ruin. The district attorney had announced a full-scale criminal investigation. His biggest political allies, the ones who had praised him just yesterday, were now scrambling to distance themselves from him. The mayor's office announced that the waterfront redevelopment project was suspended indefinitely, pending review. Finch was politically and personally finished. Sarah arrived at my apartment in the early afternoon, bursting through the door without knocking. She wasn't her usual polished self. Her hair was a mess, and she was still in her pajamas, but her face was alight with a wild, incredulous joy. "Clara," Have you seen? It's over. He's finished, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me in a fierce hug. That source of yours, they did it. They're a hero. Everyone is calling Vindex a hero. She pulled out her phone and showed me a news alert. Finch had resigned from the city council. My father called me crying. He said he feels like he can breathe for the first time in months. We're safe. You helped save us, Clara. I felt a quiet, profound satisfaction settle deep in my bones. It was a feeling of rightness, of a skewed world set straight. But as Sarah chattered on excitedly, a strange melancholy crept in. I had this enormous secret, this monumental truth, sitting in the space between us. I had never felt more powerful, and yet I had never felt more distant from my closest friend. She finally stopped pacing and looked at me, really looked at me. Her initial euphoria gave way to a thoughtful curiosity. She took in my exhausted eyes, the dark smudges of ink on my right hand, the controlled, almost grim stillness of my expression. She glanced around my studio, at the discarded sketches, the open art books, the familiar controlled chaos of my life. Clara, she said slowly, her voice soft, that source, you said you passed messages for them. How exactly did you know them? The question hung in the air. I could lie again. I could invent a story about a disgruntled City Hall employee who slipped me notes in a coffee shop. I could preserve my secret, keep Vindex safe in the shadows where she belonged. But looking at Sarah, at her honest, searching gaze, I knew I couldn't. Our friendship had just been tested and forged in real fire. It deserved the truth. And maybe, for the first time, I deserved to be seen. I didn't say a word. I walked over to my portfolio case, which was leaning against the wall. My hands were steady. I unzipped it and pulled out a drawing. It was the first sketch I had ever done of Finch, the vicious caricature of him as a Venus flytrap from the night of the gala. I handed it to her. She took it, a puzzled look on her face. I remember this night. You were sketching. Her eyes widened slightly. I reached into the portfolio again and pulled out another. It was a preliminary study for the progress cartoon, a rough sketch of Finch's monstrous, devouring face. Then another, a detailed drawing of the skeletal hands. Finally, I turned to my computer, which was still open to the file I had sent Julian. I clicked, and the final, devastating triptych filled the screen. Sarah looked from the drawings in her hand to the image on the monitor, and then back to my face. The air in the room grew still and heavy. I could see the storm of emotions in her eyes as the impossible truth dawned on her, disbelief giving way to confusion, then a flicker of hurt that I hadn't trusted her, and then finally a wave of profound, staggering awe. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She sank onto the edge of my sofa, the sketches resting in her lap. It was you, she finally whispered, the words barely audible. It wasn't a question. It was a revelation. All this time, the cartoons, the source, Vindex, is you. That single moment shattered the foundation of our friendship, the roles we had played for 15 years, the beauty and the plain friend, the muse and the technician, the sun and the moon, all of it dissolved into dust. In its place, something new and uncertain began to form, something built not on old habits, but on a new, shocking respect. I always thought I was the strong one, Sarah said later, after I had told her everything, her voice thick with emotion. We were sitting on the floor of my studio, surrounded by the evidence of my secret life. I always saw you as someone I needed to protect, to draw out of your shell. She gave a short, self-deprecating laugh. What an idiot I was. I was carrying a parasol, and you were forging a sword. The guilt she felt was palpable. Guilt for all the times she had unintentionally patronized me, for all the years she had looked at me but had never truly seen the fierce intelligence and quiet power simmering just beneath the surface. I didn't want her guilt. You were my friend, Sarah, I said simply. You were the only one who always made sure I had a seat at the table, even if it was in the corner. You used your power for me. This time I got to use mine for you. We were equals now. Not just in theory, but in fact. We had fought a battle together, each using the weapons the world had given us. She had used her beauty and social grace as a key and a distraction. I had used my invisibility and my art as a scalpel and a hammer, and together we had won. Our friendship was reborn in that small, cluttered room, stronger and more honest than it had ever been. A few days later, an encrypted message popped up on my screen. It was from Julian. Brilliant work, Vindex. The city owes you. Take a breath, then tell me what's next. I stared at the words, a small smile playing on my lips. For the first time, the future felt like an open page, and I was the one holding the pen. In the months that followed, the city seemed to exhale. Alistair Finch was indicted on multiple counts of corruption, bribery, and fraud. His trial was a sordid public affair that laid bare the rot at the heart of the city's political machine. Marcus Thorne, in exchange for a lighter sentence, testified against him. The waterfront redevelopment project was scrapped entirely, and a new commission, which included several community leaders from the threatened district, was formed to create a plan that served the public, not the powerful. The threat had passed. Clara Thorne's life, however, changed in subtler ways. I was still Vindex, still sending my sharp-edged truths to the crucible, but the desperate, angry urgency was gone, replaced by a cool, confident authority. The biggest change was internal. The cloak of invisibility I had worn for so long no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a choice. I started attending social events with Sarah, not as her appendage, but as her friend. I didn't try to be the life of the party, but I no longer hid by the potted palms either. I would stand, observe, and occasionally, when someone said something particularly foolish, I would offer a quiet, cutting remark that would stop them in their tracks. People began to notice me, not for my beauty, but for my presence. There was an unnerving stillness about me, an aura of someone who sees more than she says. Sarah changed too, perhaps more profoundly than I did. Having seen the limitations of a life built on charm and appearance, she began to build one on purpose and substance. She leveraged her family name and her formidable social skills not for charity galas, but for genuine activism. She became a fierce advocate for historic preservation and a board member for a new legal aid fund for the very residents Finch had tried to displace. She had discovered that her voice could be more than just charming. It could be powerful. Her beauty was now just a tool in her arsenal, not the entire weapon system. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a year after Finch's downfall, Sarah and I were having coffee at a small sidewalk cafe in the very district we had fought to save. The neighborhood was vibrant, filled with the sounds of life, not demolition. Sarah was excitedly showing me the architectural plans for a new community arts center she was fundraising for. I was, as always, sketching in my notebook, capturing the play of light on the old brick buildings across the street. A man at a neighboring table, a well-dressed man in his 50s, recognized Sarah. He came over, his face beaming with admiration. "Miss Beaumont, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have to say, the work you are doing is just incredible. You're an inspiration to this whole city," he gushed, his eyes fixed solely on her. He didn't so much as glance at me. For a brief, fleeting second, the ghost of our old dynamic flickered between us. I was invisible again. Saria, the radiant sun, and me, the forgotten shadow. I felt a familiar tiny sting, but it was faint, a phantom limb of an old insecurity. But then Saray did something she never would have done. A year ago. She smiled politely at the man, but didn't bask in his praise. Instead, she placed her hand on my arm, a gesture of solidarity, not ownership. "That's very kind of you to say," she said, her voice clear and firm. But you're talking to the wrong person. I'd like you to meet my friend Clara Thorne." She looked from him to me, her expression full of a fierce, genuine pride. "She's the real reason any of this was possible. She is the most powerful person I know." The man looked at me, confused, as if trying to solve a puzzle. He saw a plain woman in a simple sweater, a sketchbook in her lap. He couldn't see the truth. He couldn't see Vindex. He mumbled a polite, "Pleased to meet you," and retreated to his table. I looked at Sarah, and she looked back at me. I didn't need the man's recognition. I didn't need anyone's. My vindication wasn't in public praise. It was in the quiet knowledge of what I had done. It was in the safety of my friend's family, in the continued existence of this beautiful, vibrant neighborhood. But seeing the unwavering respect in Sarah's eyes, feeling her hand on my arm, that felt pretty good too. I gave her a small, confident smile, picked up my pen, and went back to my drawing. Looking back on it all now, the lesson seems so clear. The world spends so much time judging us by what it can see, our faces, our clothes, our charisma. It mistakes polish for substance and silence for weakness. But I learned that true power often grows in the places no one bothers to look. It can be nurtured in a quiet room, at a solitary desk. It lives in the tip of a pen, in the sharpness of an observation, in the simple, terrifying courage to draw a line and say, "This is the truth." For years, I believed that being underestimated was my curse, but it turned out to be my greatest strength. My invisibility was my most powerful weapon. It allowed me to get close, to see things no one else could, and to strike when no one was watching. I'd love to hear your own stories in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove them wrong? Or more importantly, how did you prove your own worth to yourself? Your stories are what make this community so powerful. And if this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share this with anyone you know who might be feeling invisible. They might just need a reminder of the power they hold. Remember, you don't need a spotlight to change the world. Sometimes all you need is a shadow to work from and a truth worth drawing. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and thank you for listening. "My father refused," Sarah said, a flicker of pride in her voice. "He said he wouldn't sell his name to legitimize such a thing. He told Finch to leave." She took a shaky breath. "And then Finch, he got all at McGly. He told Papa that if he didn't play along, he wouldn't just let the business fail. He would actively destroy it. He mentioned some old shipping contracts from decades ago, some irregularities, things that were common practice then, but would look terrible now. He threatened to leak it to the press, to trigger a federal audit. It's blackmail, Clara. He's trying to ruin my father, to take our home." Saraya, the golden girl, the one for whom the world always bent, was trapped. For the first time in her life, she was facing a problem her beauty and charm couldn't solve. She spent the next few days in a flurry of activity, calling in favors, meeting with old family friends, trying to find a way out. She put on a brave face, dressing in her most elegant clothes, her smile as dazzling as ever. But I could see the desperation in her eyes. The doors that had always swung open for her were now firmly shut. The people she sought help from were either indebted to Finch or terrified of his power. They offered sympathy, but no solutions. She came back to my apartment late one night, utterly defeated. The flawless mask had crumbled. She was just a scared daughter, terrified for her family. "It's no use," she said, her voice hollow. "They're all afraid of him." My whole life, a smile and a kind word opened doors. A little charm, a gentle plea. It was always enough. But this door is made of iron, and I don't have the key. She started to cry, not the delicate tears I'd seen before, but wrenching, hopeless sobs. I sat beside her, my arm around her shaking shoulders. I felt a familiar pang of helplessness, the same feeling I'd had my whole life when confronted with a world that didn't play by fair rules. But this time, something else was mixed in with it, a cold, hard knot of anger, a fury so pure and white-hot, it felt like a physical force inside my chest. This man, this preening, corrupt monster, had taken the strongest, most vibrant person I knew and broken her. He had used his power to crush a good man and terrorize a family, all for greed, and he was going to get away with it. No, a voice inside me said, a voice that sounded less like Clara and more like Vindex. No, he is not. Sarah thought the door was made of iron. She was wrong. It was made of paper, of secrets and lies, and I was the one who knew how to tear paper to shreds. In that moment, watching my friend weep, I stopped being a passive observer. The fight had come to my door, and Vindex was about to answer. That night, my small studio apartment transformed into a war room. The comforting scent of turpentine and paper was replaced by the electric hum of my computer and the bitter aroma of stale coffee. I became a creature of the night, a digital archaeologist digging through the boneyard of public records. I cross-referenced property deeds, campaign finance disclosures, city council meeting minutes, and corporate registration documents. My walls, normally covered with life drawings and landscape studies, were soon papered with printouts, connected by a sprawling spiderweb of red yarn. I was no longer just an artist, I was a hunter, and Alistair Finch was my prey. I mapped his network of shell corporations, his political appointees, and his legislative favors. A pattern began to emerge, a dark constellation of greed and corruption. My first strike had to be precise, a warning shot. I spent an entire night sketching, erasing, and resketching until I had it just right. The final image depicted Finch as a master puppeteer, a smug grin on his face, standing atop City Hall. Below him, the members of the City Zoning Commission danced on strings, their limbs flailing in a grotesque pantomime of civic duty. The strings themselves weren't twine. They were glittering gold chains that led back to the logo of a shadowy real estate conglomerate, Aurelian Holdings. I uploaded the cartoon to the secure server for the Crucible. The caption was simple, "The People's Servants." It was published at dawn. By mid-morning, it was the talk of the city. The image was sharp, witty, and just ambiguous enough to be deniable, but everyone who mattered knew exactly what it meant. At a press conference about a new public park, a reporter blindsided Finch with a question about it. "Councilman, the cartoonist Vindex seems to be suggesting a link between you and Aurelian Holdings regarding the waterfront project. Do you have a response?" Finch's practiced smile didn't waver, but I saw a flicker of something cold in his eyes. "I don't respond to the cowardly scribblings of an anonymous troll," he said smoothly. "This is a desperate smear campaign by those who are afraid of progress. They hide in the shadows because they can't win in the light." He thought he was dismissing me, but he was issuing a challenge. Cowardly scribblings, the phrase echoed in my head, stoking the fire. "I'll show you a coward." I sent a message to Julian. "I'm onto something big with Finch. It's deeper than just Aurelian. I need a researcher, someone who can dig into financials, someone I can trust." Julian's reply was instantaneous. "You've got it. I'll connect you with someone on my staff. They'll be your cutout. Send your queries through me. I'll pass them on. Be careful, Vindex. Finch plays dirty."